I am sitting on the cold maple floor of my parents' house in Ashford, surrounded by a litter of torn paper and the sharp, manufactured scent of a fake fir tree. Light from the kitchen fan flickers against sequined ribbons. The house is too warm for December, and exactly the wrong kind of festive. My sister Rowan is holding a set of car keys like a trophy. She spins them between her fingers and the metal flashes under the tree lights. Her laugh is high and careful, the kind of laugh that's been practiced into performance over a lifetime. She is 32 and she behaves like a teenager at an awards show. My father's smile is wide and uncomplicated, pure pride on a timer. My mother has her hands folded under her chin like she's watching a scene from a film she adores. Outside, in the driveway, a midnight blue Mercedes waits with a bow that is almost indecent in scale. It makes a sound in my chest, a small metallic click that indicates something fundamental has been misplaced. In my lap is a plastic bank shaped like a smiling frog from a TV show I used to watch when I was 7. There's still a flimsy price sticker clinging to the belly too. They tell me to pop the plug. I drop the rubber stopper and 2 crisp $1 bills tumble into my palm. This will be the start of your house fund, sweetheart. My father says, as if that sentence could close a ledger that's been open for decades. He winks at Rowan. She pats my knee in a way that reads like condolence. I'll drive you around if your car gives out, she said. The voice is syrupy and soft. The message is clear. Your place is always the passenger seat. My car is a small durable hatchback with over 200,000 miles and a history of midnight commutes and mountain passes, and celebratory drive. I bought it myself with paychecks earned between studio nights and overtime. I paid each month and watched my balance drop like a countdown toward independence. It's dirtier than their showroom toys, but it is mine. The room narrows and the edges sharpen. A pattern telescopes out, birthday parties with hired unicorns for Rowan. A grocery store cake for me. Graduation photos with her front and center. Prom dresses pressed in boxes for her to keep, while I carried my suit in a backpack and learned to fold shirts with the efficiency of a field engineer. These memories are not isolated moments. They are a long, precise stitch that has run through my life. I clear my throat. Bathroom, I say, and the word sounds like a small lie. Upstairs, I lock the door and stare at the face in the mirror until I recognize the person who is looking back. My hands are cold against the porcelain sin. My chest tightens in a way I have learned to describe as less of a wound, and more of a slow-consuming weight. People talk about heartbreak in metaphors. This is not a metaphor, this feels like breath becoming an object, heavy and unnatural. I sleep in my old room and listen for the laughter downstairs like it's a loop track. At 3 in the morning I sit up, breath sharp, and pack only what is mine. A threadbare stuffed bear, my grandmother gave me. A photo album with corners worn soft. The wooden box that holds my first stamped blueprint. I leave behind the gifts I bought for them. They will understand without missing what never belonged to me in the first place. The house is quiet when I slide the key from the hook. The key is cold in my palm. I set it on the kitchen counter as if laying an accusation. The driveway swallows me and keeps nothing of my leaving. I drive south before the sky colors and listen to static that wants to become music until I turn the dial off. Snow is making patterns against the windshield. I whisper to the empty passenger seat. Mary, and the sound tastes like iron. My phone buzzes. It's my mother. Not a check-in, not a concern. A bill. Did you remember to pay the electric for the cabin? The text says. The cabin is the one they bought for Rowan's photo shoots. Their help flows in that direction. At a rest stop I let the highway become an edge between a past that expects me and a future I have not yet named. I replay the small exclusions until each becomes a bright etching. The year they flew Rowan to art residencies in Europe while I worked double shifts to scrape tuition. The years when I sent myself to school and they told me to be practical. My phone rings. She answers on the 3rd ring, and hears my voice and tells me to come to San Diego. You don't have to do everything yourself, she says. The phrase lands like a life raft. In my family, help had been a river running one way toward Rowan. Letting someone hand me a towel feels like an infraction I wasn't sure I deserved. 3 days later I'm in Ruth's spare room. Her apartment smells like coffee grounds and the spice shelf she keeps for the friends who come by. She takes my defensive silence like the best kind of hospitality, without comment. I start small. I send one email, a transfer request to my firm's San Diego office. I write it with the surgical care of a person who has always built bridges and now needs to cross one for herself. 3 hours later the reply lands like sunlight, approved. There is a current that carries me and it has nothing to do with family ties. The first week is all logistics. A flight that fits my thinning budget, an apartment that fits my need for quiet, a futon pressed into a corner with a lamp that casts a forgiving light. I take a pottery class because Ruth insists. Because clay is honest and doesn't ask for explanation. My fingers learn pressure and release. My palms get scraped and then calloused. I come home with a small, crooked bowl that looks like a promise. My phone becomes a filter. I mute notifications from my parents. Their calls stack like missives from another life. The voicemails start with confusion, and then shift to concern and finally to manipulation. My father's voice, once steady as an oak, becomes a whip of authority. "Return the car," he says in a clipped voicemail. "If you don't, I will report it stolen." He thinks he can name the things that belong to me. I press delete. Each time I let the silence be a small, firm boundary. Therapy is another strange room I have to learn to inhabit. Han, the woman with empathy trained into the inflections of her voice, waits for me to find words I didn't know I was allowed to use. Favoritism, neglect. I say them and they land like objects on a table. Not apologies but data points. "It made me feel like I was worth $2, I say once, and we both laugh in the way people laugh when they see the cruelty in a single detail. At work I am the person who can make a span stand between two buildings and not fall. My reputation travels faster than family gossip. Coworkers are surprised by the private drama played out in voicemails and posts. My LinkedIn fills with messages from distant relatives and old acquaintances with sanitized versions of my story. "I heard you had a breakdown," and my colleagues see only my project reports and the steel-smooth precision of my calculation. In the space between weeks and months, I make a small ritual of saving $2 bills. They're uncommon and slightly theatrical. I tuck one into the rabbit bank on the shelf and another into the corner of a journal. Each bill marks a week I have chosen myself. The bills become a ledger of liberation. Sitting on the bookshelf, the frog bank is no longer a joke but a monument. I fill it deliberately. Rumors about me begin to grind through the family grapevine. Mental collapse, cult involvement, destitution. Rowan posts photos that hint at concern and consoling prayers. Her captions are porous, written to let strangers fill in the gaps. I know when family narrative veers into stranger territory, the people who know me best, my colleagues, my clients, see only someone who writes load calculations and signs contracts, and teaches juniors how to weld a detail in a model. Rowan shows up at my office one day, an unexpected cameo. Reception informs her I'm in a meeting. The security of propriety now has an ally. It is the first time in my life someone else's behavior has to meet consequences that aren't mine. For a while that feels like an entire new currency. The months shape me like a pot on a wheel. I turn and learn to center myself. Promotions come. The title changes. Senior project manager reads differently in email signatures than it tastes in my mouth. No longer borrowed. No longer provision. With the raise comes a steadiness I'm not ashamed to enjoy. A savings buffer, and the ability to pay for therapy without guilt. I stop counting favors as currency. I start spending the way an adult spends deliberately, and without covert indebtedness. Therapy groups become classrooms for truth. Raymond, a man whose jaw has carried the echo of family friction for decades, says in a session that he hasn't spoken to his brother in 20 years because love without respect is possession. The phrase settles into me like I memorize it and use it when my heart wants to slip into old grooves. When invitations arrive for Lena's wedding, I bury the name under a cousin's. My name is scripted on an ivory card with looping calligraphy. No +1. I read the absence as a small demand. Come back and take your place in the picture. I book a room 4 blocks away. I will be present, but not a guest of their hospitality. The day I return to Ashford, the town room hums with a kind of watchful attention. People's eyes find me and chase me with memories like little dogs. My mother is a reed of nerves tucked into the corner. My father's jaw is practiced into a stern line. I walk across the threshold, and feel their gazes catalog me. Hair, posture, shoe. I detect in their arrangement of faces calculations about how to bring me back into the fold. Rowan meets me first. She smiles with a soldier's precision. "You look incredible," she says as if she's been trained in compliment. There's a brittle edge to her praise and I see it for what it is: habit. I smile back. I have rehearsed the lines I need to be able to say without crumbling. An aunt pulls me aside and whispers about my father losing a job months ago, and their medical bills hiding under the couch cushions like secrets. The family has been unraveling, she says, and my exit has been catalogued as the trigger. My chest tightens with a cold mix of guilt and relief. The narrative has always been, you stay, you fix it. I no longer sign that contract. They call me into the library and stage a small intervention. That is in truth a dramatized confession. The room is lined with leather-bound volumes, and the smell of lemon polish. My parents sit like actors expecting applause for contrition. Rowan stands like a plaintiff delivering an opening statement. You left, my mother says with a practiced tremor. After that things fell apart. We need to talk as a family. I sit down with my spine straight. I have something to show you, I say. And for the first time I am ready to make the private public. I open a leather album and set it on my lap. I flip to a page where two birthday parties lie side by side. One with a rented pony and photographers and balloons in every color, and the other with a plain rectangular cake and a handful of friends. There are photos of graduation days where one seat is conspicuously empty. I put a recent bank statement next to a collage of postmarked envelopes and unpaid bills. They watch me like witnesses called to a trial. The pages become evidence. Each photograph is a data point. Each receipt is a line item that corrodes the narrative they've told themselves for years. My father's defensiveness starts like a tremor. We never meant to hurt you, he says. The sentence feels rehearsed. We did what we thought best. My mother adds. Intent is not the same as impact. I feel the old reflex to crumble. Apologize. Make it easier for them. But something new sits in my throat. A steady metal that keeps me upright. You treated her as if she were fragile and me as if I were durable, I say. My voice is quieter than I expect, and that makes the words land heavy. Being capable does not mean I deserved less love. Rowan swallows and picks up a $2 bill I pull from the frog bank. She turns it over between her fingers like it is a relic. I tell them I have saved one for every week since the night I left. The bills are symbolic but practical. They're a ledger for the attention I was denied. They make a sound like truth when they fall onto the oak table. No dramatic outburst follows. There is no falling apart. Instead there is that sick, thin sound that happens when the floor is pulled out from under a story. My mother's hands curl as if around a fragile paper. Her initial response is to apologize, the reflex of someone who equates an apology with absolution. My father's brow furrow. For the first time I see a truth I have avoided. These people did not mean to be cruel. They meant to keep an order that always served one child better than the other. I did the best I could with what I had, my father says. It is a plea and also an excuse. You had enough, I reply. I lay out bank transfers, tuition payments labeled with Rowan's name, receipts for her photography equipment, invoices for trips. The math is unromantic and ruthless. The ledger does not feel like vengeance. It feels like clarity. There's a slow, discomforting sound as relatives pick up the threads. Someone asks how long this has been going on. Someone else says they always thought I could take care of myself. Someone else mutters something about the burden of being reasonable. The room is a chorus of explanations that look a lot like evasion. I set conditions for reconciliation, family therapy and real boundaries. The words feel both firm and unfamiliar. I say them like I'm tenderizing a piece of meat that's been overcooked by old habit. My mother clutches my hand and says, "We'll do it. We'll do whatever it takes." My father looks at her and then at me. There's a pause heavy enough to be a hinge. He says, "Fine. It is not glorious. It is a beginning. That will have to be an." I leave the banknotes on the table, not as punishment, but as a reminder. I walk toward the ceremony with my back a little straighter. As I pass through the hallway, I hear Rowan whisper, "She's different now." Yes, I am different. The woman who left on a Christmas night with 3 items jammed into a suitcase has been replaced by someone who learned the technology of standing up for herself. It's not a miracle. It's practice and patience and the small arithmetic of saving $2 bills. The wedding is a study in life. Guests smile, but eyes glance at me like they seek some transformation. The evening is full of the little kindnesses that speak of new terrain, cousins who say they missed me and mean it, aunts who ask questions about my work instead of offering platitudes. There is an odd, delicate civility that feels like a truce. Outside in the lobby, a cousin pulls me aside and says with a softness that surprises me, "Your father's been going to job center meetings. He's been quiet about it." My mother volunteers that she's found solace at a community pantry. Rowan's Instagram pictures begin to show late-night shifts in smaller apartments. No one is fixed, but the scaffolding of change is present. I do not rush into a role I abandon. I offer help with boundaries, budget worksheets, a spreadsheet for Rowan's freelance clients, a list of job leads. I am precise, the way someone trained in loads and fasteners can be, help without ownership, assistance without obligation. Time sculpts gentler shape. The letters of apology and the promises of therapy take the form of small consistent acts. My parents go to counseling. My father's voice comes back with cracks that weren't there before. Sometimes he says the wrong thing, and then says, "I'm sorry," with real humility and not the performative kind. My mother organizes her calendar around volunteer shifts. Rowan hires a gig at a local design studio and discovers something in the dignity of regular paycheck. I do not revel in their discomfort. My point was never to punish. I sought to be acknowledged as an equal. The revenge I sought, if you can call it that, was not theatrics. It was proof that neglect can be shown as neglect and that patterns can be changed once they are seen. At home, I build a routine that is mine. Pottery shelves collect bowls and vases that are becoming less embarrassed by asymmetry and more proud of intent. My project team completes a downtown retrofit 2 weeks ahead of schedule. I accept praise without muttering excuses. The work I do is not a bargaining chip. It is an offering and also a claim. Marcus comes into the picture slowly. He works in environmental engineering and keeps his emails organized like a discipline. He texts about coffee and then shows up with a thermos on a cold morning. He listens when I talk about load paths and about my father's voicemail threats and has the particular talent of making silence feel like company instead of a test. He does not fix things I can fix. He offers tools and a steady presence. The arrangement is refreshingly devoid of performative rescue. We learn how to cook together. Our first attempt at roasting a chicken ends in laughter and a minor kitchen fire. Marcus's calm under a burnt skin crisis is a quiet kind of gray. He surprises me with small gifts that are not expensive but are thoughtful. An old architecture book for my bedside table. A playlist to calm me before big meetings. There is no rush in the way we move toward each other. It feels like the opposite of my parents' contractual love. It has one holiday 1 year after I shut the door in Ashford. I host a dinner in my small sunlit dining room. It is not a spectacle. There are no gestures meant to prove anything. My friends from work and the pottery class lean against the walls and talk about projects and glaze. Marcus slices the turkey without flinching. He catches my eye and we hold the moment like a fragile glass. Rowan calls that night from her tiny apartment. She has called every month, like a contract we were both learning to keep. She sends a photo of a clay ornament she made at the community center. It's clumsy and shaped like a lump of intention. She says, "I mailed it to you, don't laugh." I laugh because the ornament is imperfect and because it's her. Our conversation is small and ordinary and makes me feel like we are building something that will with patience hold weight. My parents send a text with an attached photo. In it is the dollhouse I had begged for as a child. Scratched paint, missing a shingle from the roof. Below the image is a scanned page, the transfer deed for a small coastal property I had once loved in childhood stories. "We found this," my mother writes. "It always belonged to you." The words are clumsy and a little late, but the gesture is there. I do not measure forgiveness in a headline. It is a path of many little steps. The deed is not a bribe. It is acknowledgement. My father, in a voice rough with the years he has carried, calls to tell me he's been attending a support group. "It helps," he says, the sentence stripped of performative flourish. "I'm trying." Months slide into a rhythm that is not perfect but is steadier than the jittered life I once thought I had to accept. My pottery pieces become gifts I give without expecting anything back. The frog bank sits on my mantel filled with $2 bills and other small tokens. The bill is a ridiculous object and also a symbol of how solitary acts can turn into a pattern of independence. At work, my team completes a landmark job, an adaptive reuse project that wins awards for creative problem solving. The press release mentions my name and the firm's CEO sends a short, sincere note congratulating the department. I tuck the email into my drawer like a quiet confirmation. Professional validation no longer has to fight with familial undervaluation. Ruth visits for the weekend and brings the kind of fierce, uncomplicated friendship that feels like oxygen. We argue about silly things, which pottery piece deserves a spot on the mantel, and then make tea and make amends. Her presence is steadying. She sees me unadorned and does not recoil. Sometimes I catch myself measuring old reflexes, reaching across a table to pay for everyone, answering a call and hearing the practiced urgency to fix. I pause and ask myself what I want. My therapist's voice. Han says once over coffee, "It's okay to accept kindness without converting it to a debt." I repeat the sentence like a mantra. Rowan's life folds and unfolds with the small stabilizations of work and routine. She shows up at my pottery studio one Thursday with a bag of her own clay. She is thinner, the edges sharpened by hard shifts and the humility of learning a new economy. She looks at me and asks, "Can you teach me how to center?" And I say yes. That exchange feels like repair without erasure. I teach her how pressure in the palms and steadiness of breath make the clay yield. She laughs when her use is impatient. I laugh because she is trying. She brings me the ornament she once mailed to me. I take it and we both see how crooked and earnest it is. My parents visit once, and sit in the kitchen while I create. My father keeps his distance at first. My mother hangs around the perimeter, helpful in ways that are not wanting to correct everything under the sun. They both listen. And then my father, in a voice that has lost some of its first-order certainty, asks me if I will talk with him once a week. "I want to learn," he says. I say yes because learning is how people build new habits. Our conversations do not always go well. Sometimes my father slips back into the language of commands. Sometimes my mother uses guilt like a tool, but the pattern is different now. He apologizes and follows the apology with action. She volunteers on a food drive and sends me a photo with flour on her sleeve. The gestures are halting and human. Revenge, as I once imagined it, was an act of spectacle. I thought I wanted to see their faces when I showed them I had built a life without them. The truth that surprised me was this: my revenge was quieter and more powerful. I reclaimed my life not by breaking them, but by refusing to be broken. I made an inventory of the small abuses and presented them with a request: will you change? They said yes in pieces. Sometimes the past still tugs. I dream of that living room morning, and the frog bank, and the way $2 fell into my lap. I look at those bills now, not as proof of neglect but as a record of choosing. I made decisions to leave, to accept help, to do therapy, to build a home. On a clear night, Marcus and I stand on my balcony and look at the city. The bridges glitter. There are buildings I helped design in the silhouette. I breathe and feel heavy with gratitude and a kind of peaceful fatigue. Marcus wraps a blanket around my shoulders and asks, "What are you thinking about?" I say that worth is not what you are asked to earn by giving the world your labor. It's what you hold for yourself when no one else will. He nods. He squeezes my hand. "I like that," he said. In the end, my family had choices. They could keep the script and be surprised by the consequences, or they could rewrite it. They began the slow work of rewriting counseling, small honest acts, quiet contrition, and I began the work of building a life that honored myself. The ledger I made was not a weapon, it was a mirror. I do not hold the ledger up like a trophy against their faces. I leave it on a table and let it be a bookkeeping of memory and proof. Evidence does not denigrate but clarify. It allowed me to take an honest inventory and to ask for real change. They either took the request, awkward and clumsy, or let the old patterns continue. Either way, I had removed myself from the center of their system of expectation. The revenge that mattered to me was simple. I became someone who would not be accounted for by someone else's favoritism. I showed up to my life on my own terms. I reclaimed the small things: freedom to say no, a home that belongs to me, a partner who listens, and the large things too: dignity, a career that values my mind, a sense of belonging that is chosen rather than assigned. When the first winter after I left comes around again, my apartment smells like rosemary and the clay dust that coats my palms. My friends crowd the table and laugh and argue about nothing. Rowan sends a selfie with a dumb grin and a clay stain on her thumb. My father emails me a short note about a support group meeting and adds, "Thank you. It is not enough to erase years, but it is something." I walk past the frog bank on my mantle sometimes and trail my thumb across the rubber. The $2 bills are proof of weeks survived and weeks chosen. They are not a tally of pain, but a ledger of autonomy. I made myself a home, and in doing so, I made clear the price of assuming someone else's worth for me. If you see this pattern in your life, call a trusted friend today and schedule one appointment for support this week. Then set one clear boundary, no explanations necessary, and honor it.